Sure. Kim, can you hear me?
Yes, you sound good.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, we'll get started. Hold on. All right. Can you see the slide deck move? I had it on pause before. All right, perfect. So today's session is basic in nature, very simple concepts, but something I feel a lot of people overlook, which is securing your work from home environment. This is something that's especially very relevant in today's day and age when almost everyone is working from home and people haven't taken home security very seriously in the past. So this is just touching upon some of the key areas of home security that I feel are very important. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself.
Has joined the meeting.
And my CTO. So I'm Mishaal Khan. I'm the Senior Solutions Architect, Security Architect here at Mindsight. I'm a certified ethical hacker. I have a very strong networking background. I'm a CCIE in routing and switching. I have done security and privacy almost all my career. I'm a certified ethical hacker. As I mentioned, I'm also a pen tester. I've had over 10 plus years of multinational experience in all sorts of organizations, from schools, government entities, enterprises, you name it. Eric's on the line as well. Eric, I'll let you introduce yourself.
No, thank you, Mishaal. So, no, I think most of you know me, are familiar with me. We've worked in the past for the most part. My name's Eric. I'm the CTO here at Mindsight. Cool thing that I get to do is, as Mishaal's giving this presentation, I'm going to have a little bit more fun today. Mishaal, you want to slide to the next slide? I think that's where we're.
Agenda?
Nope, agenda. So I guess we'll back up a little bit. So what I'd like to do today, I understand these webinars can get kind of dry at times and it's tough. Normally we'd be doing these sorts of presentations face to face and be able to read the room. So what I'd like to do, and we've done this in our last couple of webinars, what I'd like to do is offer up to you guys a chance to win $25 gift card to Amazon by asking questions throughout this presentation. We really would like to have this be a little bit more interactive than Mishaal just reading slides or presenting to you. So if you're familiar with WebEx, in the right, you should be able to ask questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx control panel. What I'll be doing throughout the presentation is reading and reviewing those questions, and then I'll pick the winner. There are certain breaks we've got plotted throughout this presentation today to read through those questions, pick the winner, and then we'll communicate afterwards and get you that gift card. But really just looking for you to participate. We don't want this to be just a very bland read to you a presentation slide. So your participation is appreciated. So with that, Mishaal, I'll let you continue on through the rest of this.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. So today's agenda is very simple in nature. I've divided this up into 3 pieces that I'll be talking through. I'll go over some tips for securing your work from home environment. I have reasons why I chose those specific tips and suggestions, and we'll go over some specific suggestions to make this a little bit more practical in nature. And I'll keep this interactive. I'll show you some screens, show you some reasoning, why I chose what I chose to present today. I have divided the sections into 4 different areas.
Has joined the meeting.
The first area is physical security. So cybersecurity has a lot to do with physical security, on how you protect your assets, your laptop, your place of work, and all those things. So the first tip I have, especially from working from home or remote or anywhere, is securing your wireless with a strong password. I cannot emphasize on this more. People have very weak passwords, not just at home, but in their organizations as well. Because if you have a geeky neighbor like me, cracking passwords is a piece of cake. You get free audits, essentially. And there are these tools available online, and Kali Linux has these things. How to crack WPA passwords. It's extremely simple. I mentioned earlier I do a lot of pen testing as well, or I used to. Here's a screenshot of a live pen test I did for a customer. Here's my setup on the left. The laptop I use, I have an external antenna. On the right, it shows me the screen, how I cracked that organization's password. It took me, it says here, 1 hour, 24 minutes. They had somewhat of an uncommon password, but it still took me just over an hour to crack it. I've masked the password here, but if I'm doing this for a neighbor or sitting in a coffee shop or wherever, this usually takes 5 minutes because people have very simple passwords. So that's the first tip there. Secure your wireless passwords. I know I changed mine when I realized it was too simple. I've checked all my neighbors' SSIDs. I can at least see them. Obviously, cracking them is illegal. So for the record, I haven't done anything. But have a secure password. That's my recommendation. And since you can't really use password managers or anything here, which I'll touch on later, have something that's uncommon and long enough. The longer the password, the harder it is to crack using these techniques. The other thing that falls under physical security is locking your workstations. I know a lot of people don't have this settings as default, and this is on the top of my priority list because someone could just snoop into your laptop, a family member or anyone passing by. If you have guests in the house, well, not right now, but there's something else that could also happen, accidentally pressing keys. So this here is Kim's daughter, and this is Kim. So Kim, who's our marketing events coordinator, she introduced this event. She kicked it off. This is her daughter, and this is her setup at home. As you can see, the keyboard is nice and bright and shiny, and I think she said it changes colors as well. Prime target for a person that age and height. She's gonna bang on the keyboard a lot. So if you have an important document up, you're editing files, and you left the area for a few minutes, bio break or whatever, and somebody comes and bangs on the delete key or whatever, you've lost some work there. So to protect yourself from something like this, and it happens a lot. I have little kids as well. If I don't lock my my laptop, I always have that fear that they may click on something or they may delete something, move files around. Anything could happen. A simple cure to that is just have a password required every 1 minute after the screensaver kicks in. For organizations, this is a simple setting. They can enable it globally on all their computers using global policies within Active Directory. But if you're using any other laptop, your home laptop or whatnot, just go in the settings and enable that. The other thing that falls under physical security, and this is also a requirement by most companies and most frameworks, is enabling full disk encryption. What this does is if your laptop gets stolen, thieves don't have full access to your hard drive. They can easily swap a hard drive, put it in another desktop using a USB connector, and they can have full access to your data without even logging into your laptop. Unless you have full disk encryption enabled, then they would require a password. And full disk encryption is as easy as one check of a box. So on the Mac, it's called File Vault. I'll show you that. On Windows, it's called BitLocker. And you can go under File Vault and you can see it's turned on. It's literally one button here and it's on. It takes a little time to encrypt everything, but what this does is it's locking up your own files so that even if your hard drive is removed, put in a new computer, you need that same password, your login password, to unlock that entire hard drive. So basic things, but this will definitely save you in case your laptop gets stolen. The other thing on this list is enable real-time file backups. This is extremely important because we don't, really look at backups when we're working from home or remote, or if we're using our own computers. We rely on our organizations to have, centralized backup systems. That's all good, but most organizations will have some sort of agent sitting on your desktop that is in real time updating or backing up those files. We have OneDrive that does this. Organizations may have Google Drive. There's mega.nz, and I'll show you what that looks like. So here you'll see an icon up here. Here it is. So OneDrive is backing up. That's my presentation. I made a little edit and it immediately uploaded it to OneDrive. So it's in real time backing up all of my work data. My other personal data is being backed up. You can see here that's mega.nz. So I'm using two different backup systems here just to be on the safe side. So have some real-time backup system in place, because when you lose data, even a day's work of data can be extremely frustrating to lose. Turn on or turn off network file sharing. This is something I've seen a lot in home networks. When you're joining your home networks, you have certain file shares that are enabled by default in Windows. And if you don't turn that off, anyone in your home can essentially look into those file shares. And we don't realize this often because it's a default settings. But for example, on the Mac, just write file sharing. In Windows, it's under networking file sharing. I have this unchecked. It's usually in Windows, it's checked by default. So just be careful of that. Anyone in your home network can actually look at your shared files if you have this feature enabled. The next section I have, so before I get into that, let's go for some questions. Eric, did you see any questions in the chat room, or should we open it up live? You're on mute, Eric.
Thanks. So, question from Edward Clark. What is the preferred and recommended wireless encryption that we should be using?
WPA2 with AES encryption. So that's a standard nowadays. So AES is the encryption type. WPA2 is the protocol for that encryption. That should be standard. Anything below that is not acceptable. So that's just the encryption type. But so if you're at home, go under your wireless settings and make sure it's WPA2 and the AES box is checked. If it doesn't exist, most likely your router is extremely old and it's probably time to change.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So with that, I want to make sure we've got that. That was Edward Clark who asked that question. So you can continue. All right. Get your questions in. Get a chance to win the $25 gift card.
Awesome. Moving on. So besides physical security, access to your data. So access security is important because anyone can remotely access your data or files, and we'll get to that under the VPN section. But primarily, passwords are what are used for breaches, and they're extremely easy to crack. So my suggestion always has been use password managers, because you can't remember 300 unique passwords. And if you're wondering, 300 unique passwords, who has 300 passwords? Everyone does. Let me open up my LastPass and show you what I have here. So let's go under my Twitter account. So I have well over 300 passwords. I lost count. So this is how your password manager should look like. My Twitter password is this long password, and it basically covers the entire length of the screen. I think this is 70 characters long, simply because that was the limit for the length of the password. But have a habit of generating random passwords using password managers, and there's plenty of password managers to use. They become very easy to use once you get over the hurdle of setting it up once. I just had my wife set up LastPass 2 days ago, and she was struggling to use a password manager for years. But if I can get my wife to use it, anyone can use it after that. But there are a bunch of password managers available. LastPass is extremely popular, so I recommend that. It's easy to use, easy adoption. So if you're not using any password manager, start with this. Use this at least. There are others that are out there. There may be some supplied by your own organization. Microsoft has them. Most other organizations have some sort of password managers built in. The Apple ecosystem has it. It's called iCloud Keychain. But then there's another one here I highly recommend called Bitwarden, simply because it is open source. They've had audits done. If you really want to go to the extreme for security, this is what you should be using, because this has an offline version. You can sync it to the cloud, but if you're paranoid, you can host it yourself on Docker or VMware and have everything locally stored and not synced to the cloud. So that's another option. But at the end of the day, if you're not using any password manager, start using something. Anything is better than using no password manager. And obviously have long passwords. That's one of the advantages of using a password manager, is have long random passwords for all your accounts, and have unique passwords. Because what hackers do is they use breached passwords to sort of test your accounts. So if you're sharing passwords between Office 365 and, let's say, LinkedIn or Twitter, if LinkedIn gets breached, which it did, those passwords are now available. They can test those passwords with your Office 365 accounts or Google accounts, and guess what? They're in using that same password. So using a password manager sort of mitigates that if you're using unique passwords and long passwords for all your accounts. On top of that, MFA is extremely important, especially when you're working from home, because you're accessing stuff remotely through VPN. Everyone now has VPN connections. So my suggestion here is always have multi-factor authentication enabled with your VPN setup. So I'll give you an example of how we do it at Mindsight. Let me open up my screen mirror for 1 second. Let me quit this. I want to show you my iPhone on how I mirror it and what you see when MFA comes up. Okay, here it is. Let me mirror my iPhone screen here. 1 second. This load. All right, so Wi-Fi screen mirror. Give it a second. Yeah, obviously during a demo this would not work. Hold on. Exit program. Let me exit this and start again. So we use AnyConnect, Cisco AnyConnect. You could be using any other VPN software. Whatever you use, there's always an option of enabling multi-factor authentication. And let's try this one more time. On my iPhone, let me go and do screen mirroring. There we go. So now you see my iPhone screen up here, and here are all my security related apps. So on the left, you see Cisco AnyConnect. If I need to VPN into my organization, working remote. I press connect. It'll ask me for my password. Let me put that in. All right. And immediately on my phone, there's Duo's login request. It says approve or deny. That's the second factor. I click on approve, and you see on the left the VPN session simply connects. No intervention and nothing that I really needed to do to make that work. So no entering 6 digits manually, and my VPN is now on. You can see I'm connected. Let me disconnect so that it doesn't affect this session. And that's how simple it is. Now imagine a bad guy had credential access. And I've in the past, when I've done a lot of these pen tests, most of these pen tests are remote in nature. The first thing I do is a phishing attack where I collect a user's credentials. They enter them in, their Office 365 credentials or whatever, and it's the same for VPN. The next thing I do is try to log in through VPN, and it works. So now hackers are in remotely without having that second factor being presented to them. With multi-factor authentication, this becomes almost impossible. You have the password, but you don't have their device. So this really bumps up your security level by that much. So this is highly recommended. Have your organization configure, MFA. It's extremely easy. We use Duo to do that. Duo has some great demos. Even on their website, you can go to demo.duo.com and try out different scenarios. I tried the VPN scenario here, but there's Windows logon, there's remote SSH, all these things. So they make it very simple. The other thing I have a suggestion here related to MFA is single sign-on. Minimize the number of sign-ons that you're doing and hence the number of passwords by combining your applications into a single portal. By that I mean is, so in our case, we have an Office 365 account. When I sign into this Office 365 account, I'm presented with this portal here. This is not an Outlook specific portal. It's the single sign-on portal that we have. Notice it automatically filled in my username and password because of the password manager I'm using. I click on sign in, and it presents me with another customized option for multi-factor authentication. I can either have a SMS sent to me. I can use the 6-digit token, but I'm going to use a security key here. This is a physical security key, a YubiKey that I have in my laptop. I touched the key, I just touched it with my thumb, and it logs in. So it's as simple as that. Now I'm logged into Microsoft's Office 365. I have access to all my applications here. This one login serves as the central portal for all the applications, whether Microsoft or Citrix or you name it, Google, whatever. I don't have to continue to log into each and every application one at a time. It can be configured for all of them. So that's the power of using single sign-on. It makes the employees' tasks much easier. Moving on to system security, and this is the second last area that I want to discuss. So system security is all about securing your actual workstations. So the tips I have here is using content filtering. You're using shared networks. You're at home. Other people are using the networks as well. Most people don't have content filtering configured or a very basic version of that. You want to protect your home network from, you have kids on your network, from them browsing to sites that they shouldn't, from malware that you may accidentally click on or someone else in your house may click on, which may spread to your devices if you haven't secured them well enough. So content filtering is a must-have. Whether your organization provides you with one or not, I believe everyone should have some form of content filtering enabled. An enterprise version of content filtering is Umbrella, Cisco's Umbrella. And what this does is it enables content filtering organization-wide, and the administrator can then set settings globally, and whatever they change globally, it applies to all the entire organization. So this is the dashboard as you see, as the admin would see for Cisco Umbrella, and it shows different activity. It'll show what's been blocked in the past, malware, or was it crypto mining software, whatever was blocked, it'll show here. Phishing, any phishing attempts, any phishing links that were clicked on, it will block those as well. And it'll show you different categories of software that's being used. Different cloud apps were discovered. You'll see if somebody's using Dropbox or a VPN connection that's not authorized. And then you can set policies and say, hey, we only have a policy for OneDrive. Someone's using Dropbox on a company issued laptop. That may be data exfiltration. That's against our policy. Let me take this one offline. So you get a lot of visibility suddenly into your network besides just content filtering. And this protects your organization from malware, phishing, ransomware attacks. Because a lot of ransomware uses something called command and control, where it calls back to its headquarters to download that ransom or to download the encryption keys. So this would protect against all known ransomware. If it's unknown, yeah, nothing can protect you against that. But if it's known and if it's not day zero attacks, then you'll be well protected using something like Cisco Umbrella. Oops. All right, it won't let me go back. Wow. One second here. Let me fix this issue here. Yeah, this is giving me issues. All right. So next tip I have here is malware protection. So or actually ad blockers before I get into malware. Ad blockers is something new to most people, but I've been using them for quite a while now. The way I block ads, or I used to block ads, was through something called uBlock Origin, which is just a plugin on the browser. But there are better ways to block ads in your entire network. And what this does is it doesn't only block ads, it blocks malware as well. Because a lot of malware sits amongst ads called malvertising, and there's a lot of trackers that these organizations use to track the click rate, who's visiting their websites, and sometimes it becomes a privacy concern as well. So one of the things I use for blocking ads network-wide is something called NextDNS. So my DNS is being pointed to NextDNS right now. This shows you live statistics of my home network right now. It shows that my network made 1.5 million queries in the last 30 days. 40% of that traffic was blocked. That's a huge number, which means 40% of the queries that are going outside my network to get resolved for DNS are junk. It's all adware, malware, or trackers primarily. And you can see what was blocked. Samsung, this domain name was blocked continuously. I have a Samsung refrigerator. That's the only Samsung device I have, which has Wi-Fi in it. Don't ask me why. It has cameras in it too, so I can log into it remotely. Again, don't ask me why. But one of the drawbacks of this is it's constantly calling home, probably every few seconds, trying to update itself or advertise its location. Well, guess what? My network's blocking all of that. You'll see a lot of other things that are being blocked. Ring, Nest, all these things are in my house and they keep calling home. So what this is doing is it's blocking everything that that should be blocked, but it retains functionality at the same time. You can see under logs, and I can click on what's been blocked. It'll show me everything that was blocked. Most of these things are trackers or pop-ups that would have basically popped up when I browse websites. This is blocking everything. And what it's doing is freeing up a lot of bandwidth for my home network as well. If 40% of the queries are being blocked, it means I'm getting way more throughput than I would have. Here's a simple test. This is chicagotribune.com. I'm not using any filters, nothing. There's no plugin on Safari right now, and that's why I chose to do this on Safari. You'll see something different about this website, the way it's viewing on my screen here versus if you go on chicagotribune.com right now. You see it says advertisement here. It's a blank placeholder. There's no advertising on this page. I scroll down and I see a little empty section here on the right as well. It's blocking all the ads without any plugin. Anywhere where there should have been an ad, it's blocking it. All these empty areas, it's just not showing up. So this is speeding up the page. There are probably hundreds of trackers on this page specifically, and you can see the difference. Here's a website called browserling.com. What this is doing is it's opening up Chicago Tribune on a sandbox environment somewhere in the cloud, and someone else's computer is opening up the same browser page over there. And so this is opening it up on Windows. And let me browse down. You see all these ads on the right are popping up. On my own browser, you don't see those ads. Those are empty placeholders. So that's how you should probably see this right now. And here's more ads on the top. So the page is full of ads. So have some sort of ad blocker in your environment. It will not only protect you from a security perspective, but also a privacy perspective. So NextDNS is one of my recommendations. There's uBlock Origin as a browser plugin. There's something called a Pi-hole running on a Raspberry Pi, which I used to use for a very long time. There's AdGuard. There's many options out there. Pick the one that suits best for you and have that implemented. Malware protection is next on the list, and everyone should have some form of malware protection enabled. Corporations can have it easy by enabling something like Cisco AMP or AMP for endpoints. Extremely easy to deploy across your organization. It will show you all the threats that it discovered, lots of charts and statistics, and you can actually take action by clicking on the threats. A few clicks and the malware is either stopped or quarantined or deleted without any end user intervention. So this is a good way to basically deploy this across your organization using this. And we can obviously set up demos, 30-day trials and stuff to show you how this works in action. Patches and software updates is something that, again, should be done regularly. For me, it's common sense. A lot of people just ignore the updates that pop up because it takes time, and I get it. It requires restarts and stuff. But what patches and updates are doing is they're fixing some vulnerabilities within the code. There's a reason why developers push out these patches, and we should be on top of those things and start updating or patching any software update that our computer has. It really makes systems much more secure because a lot of the malware that we are trying to block, a lot of the ransomware, Trojans, worms, all those things rely on the lack of security patches that are applied. So if we're patching our systems regularly, we're actually securing them much faster. Moving on to the last section here, communications. So let me see if I missed out on anything here. Yeah, so I had this funny little picture up here for ad blockers. Every time you say something or browse something or do something on your computer, it's sharing that information with every single app that you're running, with Google, with Microsoft, with Apple, with everyone else. And there's a lot of data that's flowing amongst your network, as I showed you. But the last thing I want to show you here is so communications, form of communications. We're all using some form of video communications, audio communications, especially working from home. We're not using our desk phones as often. We're not communicating in person as often. So this makes us rely more on video communications. So the first thing here is, companies should have a policy set for this. A lot of companies have had BYOD policies, bring your own device policies to work. Now this is the other way around, taking your work device to home, the exact opposite. And most companies in the past did not have any policies on how to tackle this. So, first things first, there should be company documentation and policy on how to work from home, what are the tools to use, what are the approved methods to use, the communication tools, emails, the environments, and all those things should be documented for legal compliance purposes and just general good best practice. Training should also be provided. This should be part of the company's training curriculum when they do security awareness training on how to secure your devices when you're away from the work. It's built into most security awareness trainings, stuff like using VPNs and MFA and all those things. So update those, keep on top of those things, because it matters much more today than it did in the past. But securing your collaboration, so this has been a big issue, and you'll see a lot of headlines of the term called Zoom bombing. And I'm going to touch on this because this term is not only specific to Zoom. Zoom bombing actually applies to any form of communication. It could be, GoToMeeting, WebEx, whatever you're using. People can get into these meetings if you're not securing them right. And we laugh about it and say, I've seen those clown pictures where a clown pops up into a meeting, or someone who's not really allowed to be in the meeting. But this could end up being pretty dangerous as well. You see here, the sign of a swastika here, people making political statements. There's some things that are actually censored in this, in these thumbnail previews. This whole article talks about how this thing was hijacked by political activists and hackers, and this has happened a lot in the past few months. There are inherent vulnerabilities in video communication software, and as organizations, we should be aware of these things, and as security professionals, we should be picking the right communication tools. So some things I've mentioned here is end-to-end encryption. Not every software, not every communication tool has end-to-end encryption enabled. There are few that do. WebEx has that enabled by default. If that is important to you and your form of communications, then that is something that you need, end-to-end encryption. Another way of protecting it is single sign-on, as I mentioned in the past. So when us as Mindsight, we log into our WebEx, we have a single sign-on portal. We use the same credentials for Active Directory. We log in once, and our WebEx accounts are also logged in. It keeps it much more secure. This way, a bad guy doesn't have some default credentials of WebEx only, which we forgot to change. It's all centralized, all controlled by our administrator. And we have MFA enabled on that single sign-on account. So even if someone does have credentials for our Active Directory, they don't have our devices. So all these little things, these layers of security, layer upon layer, adding them to our collaboration and our video communication makes it a lot more difficult for an outsider, a hacker, to either snoop into our traffic or Zoom bomb in, or basically cause some disruption within our communications. So those were my, I think these were 15 odd suggestions. and I leave it open to any questions. I know I went through a lot of different things, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. Let's hear it.
So a couple questions have come over, Mishaal. The first one from John Jerry's, excuse me, is what do you think of Malwarebytes? Should they use the free or the subscription model? I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, so I use Malwarebytes as well. So that's a great tool to use. I use the free version. It's sufficient for my needs. But obviously, if I use it on a personal basis, our company uses AMP for endpoints, which is deployed company-wide. So if you're talking about personal use, I think free is good enough. You'll have to do manual scans, but depending on what system you have, if you have a Mac, you don't need to do a lot of scans very often. But if you have Windows, then set it on auto, and I believe that requires the professional version. But if you're an organization that needs to deploy it, obviously to every single workstation, then without a doubt, without a question, you have to have the professional version because it has features of centrally managing all the threats and then deploying policies across different laptops.
Sweet. So next question comes from Edward Clark again. Because staff members are taking laptops, tablets, and desktops home, would you recommend a tracking software so the company knows where their assets are?
That's a tricky one because on the one hand, the asset itself, the laptop, is the property of the organization, so they have every right to track it. On the other hand, it's a privacy concern as well. But if you're using company asset for personal use and that's against policy, then the company has every right to investigate that on why that's happening. That's why they need to track it. So yeah, it depends on company policy. In my opinion, it's not a huge security threat to use asset tracking software. Obviously, there are centralized asset inventory software that doesn't necessarily track, like physically track the location using IP or GPS, but it just tracks uptime and if software is installed or anything's been altered or unlocked or settings changed and stuff like that. That's way more important than actually tracking the physical location. But if that feature is available, I see no harm in it. I also don't see a lot of security related benefit to it, especially when you're following security best practices like full disk encryption, MFA, and all these things, then tracking really doesn't matter at that point. That's my opinion.
Awesome. And then I've got a question here from Andrea Grover. Was there a way to block the phones from listening to everything and then presenting the ads?
Block the phones from listening.
Yeah, so you had the friend slide up there with Google, Instagram, Facebook.
Okay, those phones.
Yeah.
Got it.
Fortunately, yeah. I'll let you answer, but
the easiest way is delete those apps, but no one wants to hear that. But you can do a few things here. You can either tweak the privacy settings. So what I've done personally so I use Instagram. I don't use Facebook or most other apps, but in Instagram, there's if you're an iPhone user, there's a setting under privacy and microphone and say disable microphone access for Instagram. I've disabled microphone access, image access to my folder, and access to the camera. So I use Instagram just to browse pictures. If I need to post anything, I allow access temporarily and then disallow access right after posting. I'm not a frequent user, so it doesn't bother me. But stuff like Instagram should not have microphone access specifically, especially if you don't need it. And this applies to all the apps within your phone. So make sure your privacy settings are set to block access to microphone and the camera if needed. That's one way of protecting it. If you have ad blockers, that's not going to block access to them listening in. but it is going to block access to those apps, tracking your every move. So tracking what you do online, tracking where you are, and basically presenting you ads specific to your interests. It's going to block all those things.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's it from Question Land. So where are we at?
So before we move forward, I have so I just wanted to bring this up because I mentioned a few different software applications that we as an organization use to protect our assets. We do offer 30-day proof of value trials available for those specific applications. So I demonstrated Cisco Duo. We'll set it up for you. We'll set up a 30-day trial for this where you can play around with all the features. One advantage of us setting this up is that we'll do the initial setup for you. So we're not really charging you for the professional services to set up the initial trial, which includes access to the dashboard, just basic policies to get you up and running. Anything obviously more complicated, and we'll talk about it. But you're up and running in a matter of hours with something like MFA. We also offer trials for Cisco Umbrella. We'll set up the backend dashboard. We'll give you full access to see visibility within your organization, and everything that it would have blocked. We won't turn on active blocking yet. We can, but we prefer just to monitor it for a couple of weeks. It'll show you value basically if you really need a solution like this, if you don't have it in place. And believe me, almost 100% of the time it gives value to organizations because it helps you see what otherwise it is not obvious that's going on within your networks. We also have Cisco WebEx trials available. So if you're curious on the features of what WebEx entails, how to set it up, we'll help you set up a trial for that. Obviously, we're using WebEx right now, so you have some familiarity with how this works. But from a security perspective, I just want to throw that in that this was made from the ground up with security in mind, with things like single sign-on, MFA, end-to-end encryption. All these things were baked into this platform from its inception, and especially because the other suite of applications that come with Cisco, they all integrate pretty well into this. So this is an enterprise-grade solution. I wouldn't use this just for personal one-on-one communications. But if this is something you're looking at, then we can absolutely help out with this. We have solution architects dedicated to collaboration that can help have this conversation. We also have our next session coming up. So before we take any more Q&A, I'll just last slide here.
Has left the meeting.
Our next session is on NAC, Network Admission Control or Network Access Control. Fortinet will be our sponsor there, and you can use this QR code to sign up or the link at the bottom. This is on June 4th. With that, I open this up to more questions.
So any further questions out there, guys? Nothing's come in since the end here, Mishaal. So our final winners there were Edward Clark, John Jerry's, and Andrea Grover for the $25 gift card. So we'll be reaching out and getting those into your hands. So thank you for your participation today. Really do appreciate that. So Mishaal, wrapping.
Yeah, so congratulations to the winners. And feel free to reach out. There was a lot of information presented here. We can share the slides for this. We'll actually put this into one deliverable, all the notes, I think 15 tips that I went through, and we can share it with other participants in the coming few days. And if in the meantime, if you have any questions around any one of those things, any demos, any solutions, feel free to reach out to myself or to Eric or anyone in our organization, and we'll be more than happy to talk you through all the options that are available.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank
Has
you.
left the meeting.